Explain for us how this group has been able to make so much money.
Well, unlike its predecessor, Al-Qaeda, which raised money principally from external sources, ISIS...
Donations from
donations,
Saudi Arabia and
Saudi
Qatar.
Arabia, charities, for example.
Yeah.
ISIS is primarily self-funded. And the largest stream of funding coming to ISIS is through the illicit sale of oil in territories in Iraq and Syria that contain oil wells and oil refineries that ISIS controls. The estimates are that they bring in as much as $1 to $2 million a day from the sale of oil on the black market.
And what are their other sources of funding?
In addition, they have raised as much as $20 million from ransom hostage payments. They also raise money from extortionate payments and taxes that they impose on the people in the territories that they control, the businesses in the territories they control, and then finally on the sale of ancient artifacts that have been stolen from Iraq and Syria.
So I thought that there was some question about funding coming from Qatar and other countries.
There is some external funding, but their primary sources of funding are internal.
Is there a way for the U.S. to stop these funding sources? I know the U.S., the coalition has tried to target some of these portable oil and gas refineries. But what about, for instance, the people who buy this illicitly obtained oil and gas?
No, exactly. The Treasury Department needs to be focusing on the middlemen, the smugglers, the people that are actually transporting as much as 20,000 to 30,000 barrels of oil a day across the border into Turkey and then also into Syria.
They're not targeting them?
Well, they haven't identified any individual. At least they haven't placed them on the Treasury list for blocking and freezing the assets of the middlemen, of the smugglers, of corrupt border guards at the border that are looking the other way when the oil is being smuggled across the border into Turkey. And I think that the Treasury Department needs to intensify its efforts on those types of individuals.
It would seem obvious that you need to go after those guys in order to stop this trade.
Well, I think it is, but my sense is that the Treasury Department has had some difficulty in developing some traction, establishing its footing, and focusing and identifying those individuals.
What do you make of this ISIS plan to create its own currency? Is that something that could really actually happen?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, right now the estimates are that they have as much as $1 million to $2 billion in reserve. I mean, this is the wealthiest terrorist organization that the world has ever known. And so with that kind of money, it's hard to understand what's the potential, what could they do with that. So certainly it's a possibility. But I think the difficulty, of course, with that kind of money is you can't just put that money in shoe boxes and place it under your mattress. It has to enter into the financial system at some point in time. So I think the Treasury needs to be focusing on banks in Qatar, for example, and in Kuwait that may be the recipients and handling money for ISIS.
They have so much money, you say, and yet the current Undersecretary for Terrorism and Financial Intelligence, David Cohen, says they don't have enough money to actually run a country or set up the so-called caliphate that they want to. Do you agree with that?
Well, I'm not so sure. I think they have, again, the estimates are as much as $1 billion in reserve that's in their possession. And so certainly some of that money has to go back into humanitarian activities for the people in the populations that they control. But they certainly have ample funds to finance their terrorist operations, to kill innocent civilians, to orchestrate and plan and implement terrorist attacks. So they shouldn't be taken lightly.